Come up, all the lovely people at the back. So if you go far right, there we are. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second weekend of the First Thought strand of the Galway International Arts Festival. We are delighted to see you here. It's fantastic how people in Galway get up early in the morning to come and hear intelligent discussion. We had a wonderful weekend last weekend, kicked off by Mary Robinson, who was treated like Beyoncé. It was as if a rock star had entered NUIG, and she was absolutely marvellous, but it was terrific to see such enthusiasm, particularly from young people, for her. Greta Tunberg, the remarkable Swedish activist, began at age 15, protesting outside the Swedish Parliament in August 2018 about the need for immediate action to combat climate change. Her school strike for the climate began attracting media attention, and she has since become an outspoken climate activist. In response to the publicity, the School Strike for Climate movement began in November 2018 and spread globally out to the United Nations Climate Change Conference in December of the same year. Young people will grow up to inherit the world my generation has made. They're rightly concerned about their futures and the futures of their children, and about the most valuable communities on the planet, the most vulnerable communities on the planet, who will be the first to suffer if we don't take action soon. We're privileged today to have 4 of the young people who participated in the most recent school strike for the climate, all of them attending schools here in Galway. They are Cormac O'Sullivan Moran, St. Enda's Threadneedle Street, I'm mentioning them by school, Jakub, Kostanski, St. Enda's Threadneedle Road, May Sheehan, Seaman College, Ginvara, and Amy Friel-O'Donnell of Taylor's Hill. And I'm grateful to you all for your mature, inspirational activism on the most important existential threat the human race faces right now. In conversation with the young people will be Eamonn Ryan, leader of the Irish Green Party. He's been leader since May 2011. He's been a TD for Dublin Bay South since 2016, and previously from 2002 to 2011 for the Dublin South constituency. He served as Minister for Communications, Energy and Natural Resources from 2007 to 2011. During his time in office, he installed wind capacity in Ireland doubled, and by 2010, the average daily energy derived from renewable sources as a percentage of total demand had increased to 17%, peaking at 42%. He also committed Ireland to the European Supergrid programme in 2009 and announced major government investment in marine energy research projects. Government schemes were expanded from home energy retrofitting, and uptake increased. A broadband for schools scheme was launched, and a national electric vehicle and charge point initiative was announced, which was subsequently implemented by the new government. We always forget that people have to go into partnership governments in this country now. And there will be bigger parties and smaller parties. And the bigger parties will always be Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. Smaller parties will be a mixture of others, mainly Labour and the Green Party. When people get fed up with the government, they don't blame the big parties. They blame the small parties. And it takes them a very long time to forgive them. And I've just read a list of the achievements carried out by a very small party when in office at a difficult time. But thankfully, as we know now, the Greens have been not just forgiven, but are starting to be celebrated, and Eamonn presided over the Green Party's resurgence in the recent European and local elections, and that reflects the party's dogged commitment to its very serious message and proving that it's a long road that has no turning. So I'm going to hand you over now to Eamonn Ryan and our 4 wonderful young people. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you, Katrina, and thank you everyone for coming here this morning. I'm looking forward to this conversation. This is the home of liberal arts and humanities education in the west of Ireland, really important home for our understanding of where we're coming from and where we might go to from here on that path. You make the path by walking. You set the path. I'm going to ask each of our 4 panellists to come up and give a short introduction of some of their own thoughts, and then we're going to go into a conversation, and then I'm going to throw it open to the floor, if that's okay. Just very briefly, just responding to what Katrina said, framing it a little bit from my perspective, that there's been a real change in the last year around this issue of climate change. We've known about the physics, the atmospheric physics, going back to Tyndall, back 150 years ago, around the time this university was founded. We've known for certain the risks going back 30, 40 years, what James Hansen presented to the US Houses of Congress back 30 years ago, the science is still the exact same today. The threat is still just as real. But in the last year, the consciousness has changed for a number of reasons. The International Panel on Climate Change Scientists last October issued a really seminal report saying, while we've known this now for a long time, the space in which we need to act is shortening by the day. That if we're to achieve that objective set out in the Paris Climate Agreement of keeping average global temperatures below a 1.5 degree rise, that there's 42 gigatons, 420 gigatons limit in what we can release into the atmosphere. And we're releasing about 43 gigatons a year. It gives you less than 10 years to meet what the scientists say we need to do to stay that 67% chance of staying below 1.5 degrees. And if we go to less than 2 degrees, it might give us a few more years. But what the best science say that the wheat crop, if in 1.5 degree worlds, it might shrink by 9%. If we go to 2 degrees, it'll probably shrink by 17%. And the underlying risk is that we're sailing fast over a reef where the rocks could hold the boat of our civilization, and we would hit a tipping point that actually leads to runaway climate change that could not be reversed. And we won't know if we've hit that reef until after the fact, until it's too late. So that report was seminal. And it was followed a few weeks later, last October, by a report from the World Wildlife Fund. My interest in this whole environmental issue starts when I was 16, when I did a course in ecology in school. And I remember at the time, that was back in the late 70s, people science warning, that if we didn't change our relationship with nature, that we would lose half our wildlife in the subsequent 40 years. And that's what that World Wildlife Report shockingly said last October, that we have lost half of wildlife, all invertebrate mass by weight, over the last 40 years. And 1 million species are now threatened. And it too presents a rock that we could crash our civilization on, because the very fertility of our soil, the very natural systems that we are part of and depend on, are at risk. That was followed last autumn by David Attenborough's latest series programs saying the planet is in peril, that plastic is poisoning our oceans. And it was followed then, or probably at the same time, by that young woman, Greta Thunberg, who started this climate strike movement. And maybe it, more than anything else, I think, changed the consciousness, because you can get all the amount of science. We've heard the science for 30, 40 years. We've known all about the importance of ecology for that time too. But it wasn't until a young woman put it into really stark, hard, clear, concise words that it seemed to strike home. And that's why I think it's really useful here today that we 4 young students who were inspired, and I would imagine, by some of her work, and got engaged in our country in the climate strike Fridays for Futures movement to raise the alarm. Our house is on fire. We have to act now. So what I was going to do is maybe ask them, starting with Jakub and then working way across Amy, Cormac, Cormac and Amy, maybe to go up to the podium, just to give a very short, because what's worked in this is young people just speaking their truth as they see it. So I'm going to ask you maybe just to, if you can, take the podium to give that short first introduction, and then we'll maybe open up into a slightly wider conversation. Jakub, the floor is yours.
So my name is Jakub, I'm from Poland. So basically, small introduction. I'm here to prove to Galway that young people can do it, to prove to the adults that young people can do it, to prove to everyone that young people can do it, and especially the government. So I got interested in climate change through a TY project that we did last year on plastic. Then kind of got really interested in that, so kind of did more research on it, then went into looking at doing some strikes in Galway with May, actually. So myself and May run the Fridays for Future strikes in Galway. So we have a few people on that helping us with that. So basically, that really inspired me to do some climate change strikes in Galway, then decided to do more strikes, not only in Galway, but doing some nationally. So I decided to go up to Dublin to participate in some of the strikes up in Dublin also. Basically, I got interested in the whole climate change aspect because I want my kids to have a future like a life like we do right now. You know, I want them to live the life not having to worry about will they be able to live in 20 years' time. Hopefully they will. And basically, just wanted to do as much as I can for the world, as much as I can do. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's May and I'm 16 and I'm from Kinbarra in Galway. I got interested in climate action and climate justice kind of late last year when they started striking in Europe and particularly in Australia. I saw it kind of on the news, but I didn't really take that much notice of it. It was kind of in December when Greta spoke at the UN conference and I watched the video, I don't know if you saw it, where she called them immature and that kind of thing. And it kind of made me realise just how serious the issue is and how we as young people, we're the last generation that can actually do something. So I think that's kind of what really started my passion. And then kind of in January, I saw the strikes start in Ireland, particularly in Cork. So in February, I messaged the national page and asked about Help First strike starting in Galway. So we started that, and then along with Jakub and a couple of others, we started our first strike for March 15th. I think the March 15th strike definitely made me realise how much of a power young people can have. We were only expecting like 200 people there, but 500 showed up, and even the media coverage we got, and just when we were walking down Shop Street, like people were filming us and clapping, and it was just a really empowering moment. For me, the most important thing in relation to climate action is plastics. Like plastics we're completely addicted. It's from like when we wake up in the morning to when we go to bed. It's in the toothbrushes when we brush our teeth. It's in our phones. It's in our clothes. It's everywhere. Like if you ever just stop and look around, plastic is like, it's outstanding how much plastic we have. And Ireland is actually the worst in Europe for plastic waste. And we produce 61 kilograms per person per year, which is double what the UK do. As well as that, like with our plastic, like recycling and that, only 9% of the world's plastic is recycled and 12% is incinerated. The rest ends up in landfill or else is unaccounted for. And we can see that in the oceans. Like by 2050, there's expected to be more plastic than fish in the ocean. And I think plastic it was only invented in like the early 1900s, but only became popular in like the 60s. And to see just how much plastic we've made and how it's integrated in every part of our lives, I think that's the first thing we should start changing, because it's an addiction that we need to stop.
So, like a lot of people, I heard a lot about climate change growing up, but it never really felt like a real issue to me until I was in 6th class, when my teacher showed me An Inconvenient Truth by Al Gore. So that documentary came out in 2006, and it showed his presentation about climate change and what we have to do about it. Before then, I'd always heard a lot of things. I knew that the polar ice caps were melting, polar bears were at risk of extinction and so on, but I didn't really quite realize the impact for us, all of us. Prior to then, it just seemed like a very distant future, and it seemed like it was a danger to us, but not a very kind of imminent one. And more recently, we hear new figures and new facts, like we have to act within the next 10 years before it's too late. And since then, I kind of felt that it's all our responsibility to do something about climate change. So I'm most interested in animals and pollution, because I think we're stewards of this planet, not the owners of it. And while we cause climate change, it doesn't just affect us, it also affects all of the wildlife, plants and animals. So I think it's very important that while we can still do something for the animals and the plants and all of our wildlife that can't, we must, because, you know, it's not our right to take that away from them. So I felt that it was very important that I go along to the climate strikes and I, you know, raise awareness about these things, because we're the only people who can do that.
Sorry. Hello, my name's Amy Rose. I'm sorry, I'm a bit gross looking. I'm just back from an eco-commune camp. I started driving at 6, so I just came about 40 minutes ago, a bit ironic. But yeah, I'm here now. I got involved, like most people, with the strikes through Greta Thunberg's like viral videos of her speaking, and it was always a thing that was in the back of our heads, but like Cormac was saying, it was kind of hard to really think about it until someone actually told the truth. And then when she came out about it, I have a younger cousin called Roisin, and then it kind of hit home, and I'm just thinking, you know, I want her to have a future, I want her to have the life I have, and when there's something like that, it's kind of different than just, oh, it'll be a shame. You know, it's personal then. I'm involved a lot with Extinction Rebellion as well. I did the Hollywood Rebel Camp in Edinburgh, where we camped outside the Parliament for a week. And during that week, we did 8 direct action protests, which was such an amazing experience. And I also, we blocked off 3 of the roads, the busiest roads in Edinburgh. And we got a lot of news coverage, which was amazing, and it was such an amazing experience. And then because of that, I got involved in Ireland, and just a few weeks ago we actually blocked off some streets as well, and we got loads of news coverage for that. So I'm more involved in the direct action, because I'm just sick of just trying to like share something on Twitter or something. It's a bit late now, but I'm also very passionate about the meat industry and fast fashion. Thank you.
I understand. I think there's an Extinction Rebellion today in town at 1 o'clock, is there?
Yeah, there is.
You've got to be there. Can someone explain to me what's all the different groups? So there's Fridays for Futures, there's School Strikes for Climate, there's Extinction Rebellion. How do they connect to each other, or is there?
Well, Fridays for Future and School Strikes for Climate are basically the same thing. They were both formed from the same idea of Greta when she started striking. I think it was just in the UK, it kind of became known as School Strikes for Climate, whereas on the continent it became known as Fridays for Future. So it's like, even in Ireland, a lot of our national kind of meetings and all our national protests and stuff, it's people of both Fridays for Future and School Strikes for Climate, because we're fighting for the same thing. We'll work together no matter what.
Okay. Amy, can you give us a sneak preview of what's going on in Galway today on that Extinction Rebellion?
It's just, I think, another meeting, another project. I think they're going to do another direct action, but you don't normally find out.
Okay. You can't tell. Yeah. And Amy, just one other question back to you. You went to Switzerland as part of the international organisation. Do you want to just tell us about that? How did that happen?
Well, I haven't actually gone yet.
Oh, not yet.
It's an international meeting for all the Fridays for Future and school strikes in Switzerland. So I'm leaving on the 3rd of August, and it's a week-long thing in Lausanne. So there's going to be 450 young people from a lot of countries, but mainly from Europe, because there's very little air travel, because we want to cut down on our emissions. So we'll be having meetings, kind of talking about what international actions we can have, like building relations with people from other countries, learning from their experiences, and I think Greta will be there as well, and we'll also have talks from different scientists and politicians across Europe.
Okay. Jakub or Cormac, can I ask one observation? I've been to a lot of these Friday demonstrations. There's one outside the Dáil every Friday, which is great. It tends to be more girls than boys. Is that fair? Or if so, do you think why? Am I missing something on that? Or?
I don't know. It's up to the young people to decide if they're going to go to these strikes or not. So it's really up to the individual themselves. I don't know about why there's more girls than boys, but there's 2 boys here and there's
That's
2
true.
girls here, so it's equal here.
There's 3 boys here. And Cormac, I was up in Donegal during the week, and there was one of the climate strike there, Conal O'Boyle, and he was interesting. He was chatting away about it, and he says, "Is it cool?" He was saying, in some ways up in Donegal, what did he say in Donegal accent? There's a lot of petrol heads up here, he said. And he says, it's not that cool. What's your sense? Are people, how do your classmates, what do they think of you getting involved?
Well, I can't speak for Donegal, but I know down here, I think most people will realise that it is a big issue, and it matters a lot to a lot of people, because we know that it's not just third world countries, or it's not, it affects us too directly, and it will affect us. We know that, and we've learned a lot about that, especially from people like Greta Thunberg, who are our own age. It doesn't seem like it's coming from a higher up place. It's our peers who know about it, and in fact, our peers who care about it more sometimes. Yeah. So I think it might not be cool, but it certainly is important to people.
Yeah, I remember that strike in March. Everyone was no one knew the numbers that were going to come up. And it was kind of organised to the last. And the great thing about it, and since then too, is still student-led and student-organised. How do you organise? When you're saying everyone has to turn up on a certain day, what sort of networks are you using to organise it?
Well, for the strikes here in Galway, we have a group of, I think it's around 6 of us. So we had for March 15th anyways, we had a meeting kind of the end of February and divvied out what jobs, because there's a good bit of work that goes into it, especially to do with Garda clearance. Because obviously if you're having marches going down Shop Street, you have to tell them, so it's not spur of the moment. So that's definitely a big aspect of it. And then also the social media aspect of it is quite big. On our Instagram, Facebook and Twitter pages, that's how you tell young people that it's on, because that's where young people are. So it's a lot of, for our numbers anyways, we did polls and it was always at the 200 mark or less. So when 500 people showed up, it was a surprise because we weren't expecting it. But.
And is it all on Facebook, or is it on Instagram, or is it on, how are you communicating with each other?
It's Instagram primarily for us, for the younger of the young people, if you know what I mean. I don't know how, 13, 14-year-olds wouldn't be on Facebook. They'd be on Instagram, so.
Facebook would be glad to hear that. Yeah. It's interesting you said, and a couple of you said there when you were just making an introduction, that you want your young cousin, I think you said, Amy, to have the same conditions that you have, I suppose. But sometimes when you listen to, there was a very good young woman from Cork spoke at our climate committee in March, and I think we might have, is Hildegard Nocton here? Hildegard, are you here? Hi, Hildegard. You'll remember the moment where the young Samaya Mohammed, I think was her name, and she said something slightly different. She said, you were always worried about would you get a job and who would you fall in love with and how would you do in your exams. She said, we have to worry about all that too, but we have to worry that maybe we won't have the future you had. Is there that sense? Do you have any sense? Is there a fear for your own future? What about your cousins? What's your sense of, when you read and hear about the science, what the future is going to be for you?
I guess, at the moment, I'm not really that scared about my future, because I feel like that I'm kind of lucky almost that I've, gotten to 16 and it's only really becoming a problem. But what I'm worried about is trying to fight for the people who don't have a voice or can't fight, including my, my young cousin, especially since I've gotten really close to her. She's like a younger sister to me. And I know, because she's so young, she probably doesn't even know what's going on. And I just, I just love to see her grow up and to have a life. And it's different when you know somebody. I feel like if I didn't know somebody who was that young that was close to me, it would be completely different. I probably wouldn't care as much as I do.
Mm-hmm. Have you, Jakub, any sense that what's your sense of that, of the future ahead of you?
Definitely, I'm 18 right now, so I'm happy that I'm 18 and I'm able to live the life that I'm living right now. But when I grow up and have kids, I want them to have the same life that I'm having right now, or maybe even a better life than I have right now. So it's kind of like, at the moment, working towards having a better life for them.
Yeah. One of the broad questions, if I Cormac, to put to you, what you said there in your short few words, is that you also have that sense of care for nature being connected to this. Mm-hmm. And each of you can answer this in turn, maybe. I'm just thinking, in Galway, so you're in school in the centre, and where do you connect? Where is your favourite place to connect to nature in Galway? If you're advising me, where would I go to connect to nature in Galway? Where would I go?
Well, quite close to my house is Silver Strand, the beach, and I love the sea and the ocean. And just even walking up and down that beach, you can really get a sense of the kind of natural beauty that we have, especially in the west of Ireland, very untamed. And even there, when I go down to the beach or whatever, even there I see plastic and I see rubbish and littering and that sort of thing. And I feel maybe that these things won't last. These things won't be here forever. And we have to act now because, these are some of the most beautiful things we have in our world. And, it's our responsibility to look after them. So, yeah.
Amy, you said you were looking dishevelled because you just come from Earth Song, is it? Or the?
Yeah, sorry.
I don't think it's dishevelled at all. But does that give you a connection to? Is part of that going there? Is it? How does that work? How do you? Maybe just explain to the audience who might know about it. Earth Song.
So basically, Earth Song is like a 10-day camp commune. So we camp in this field, and we cook over an open fire. We have venues, big tents, and there's drumming workshops, there's yoga, sound healing, gong baths, all that heavy stuff. But it's really nice because you learn to kind of even sit with boredom because you don't have phones and technology and stuff. So I guess that goes into a lot. There's a woodland path, so I'd be going there quite a lot. And because you're actually focused, you really do when you're wow, even the stars at night, because it's kind of in the middle of the nowhere. There's no light pollution, so you really do appreciate the stars. And there's bits like that I'll miss if it keeps going the way it is. But yeah, so that keeps me really connected to the earth.
Is it a shock coming back to the city?
Yeah, I don't like it.
Amy, you're not in the city. You're out near Kinvara. Is there? God Almighty, that's an amazing place to connect to nature. Or do people romanticize it out there a bit, the burn and all that?
Well, I think it's one of the most beautiful places we have, even though the Burn's technically in Clare, not Galway. But where I live, it's a lot of nature, and even there's a lot of tourists that would come this time of year. And I think one of the main problems we have is in the Burn, there's obviously lots of rare flora and that kind of thing, and it's a lack of education that you can't just walk through them and trample on them. But yeah, where I like to connect with nature is definitely just even if you walk down the quay where Kinvara is, it's a really peaceful, and you can see the castle, and even if you stand in a certain place, you can see Galway Bay at night with the lights, especially the city, because it's a really focal point. But yeah, the sea and just everything that is there in rural Ireland, it's such a pretty place to live.
Yeah. Jakub, can I come to you and maybe ask, and let's jump in on this as well. What you're learning in school, how does this connect to this? Is it relevant, or where are you learning the science or the story around this? Is it through school, or is it through media, or where do you get your information?
So geography in school is always a big thing to do, because you learn about the trees, you learn about the rocks, you learn about everything in geography, but the way I kind of learned about climate change and the issues on climate change and everything was through a youth space that I go to, which is just on Prospect Hill, the Youth Ireland office. So we have a climate change group there, and we work closely in partnership with Troca. So every year we go to Troca and we do workshops from them. We get a lot of information. We'll see how can we partner with different organizations to try and basically raise awareness on climate change and do workshops to basically educate more young people and also adults on climate change issues and what they can do and how they can basically reduce their plastic use at home.
How did you get involved in that?
So 7 years ago, I started going there as a participant myself. And then about 3 years ago, I started helping out with some of the summer camps that they do. And now I'm a junior youth leader at the office.
You're an old hand. I was saying earlier on, we were chatting inside, so I hope you have a bit of time to think about this, in terms of think for questions to ask. Galway, hopefully, may in the near future have a directly elected mayor, city and county or whatever. It'd be up to the people of Galway, I suppose, to decide that. But given your interest in this subject, or given anyway, even put aside the interest in this subject, just pretend for a minute that you're the directly elected mayor of Galway and you've got complete power. You can tell everyone what to do. You'd be like Boris Johnson. Everything's possible. What would be what would be something you'd like to do? I might go across. I'll start with you, Amy, and work across. You're not daunted.
For me, I guess one of the big ones, I know if it was just Galway, it's kind of different, but for me, it'd be keeping the fossil fuels, like, in the soil. Like, I feel like that is definitely, like, one of our, like, biggest problems. Like, we have to keep, like, I read this thing that we have to keep 80% of our turf, oil, and coal in the ground for the next 100 years, or else it's going to run out. And the damages of it running out will be way worse than us cutting down. So I guess that is a big one for me. And I know electric cars, they're actually, like, not that good. So for me, a big one is, like, public transport, and even maybe, like, really good public transport or free public transport for under 18-year-olds. That, I feel like that would make a huge difference.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking, where's your school again? It's in...
Taylor's Hill, Dominican College.
Right behind.
Yeah, it's really nice.
And do you mind me asking, how did you get to school?
I actually walk sometimes because it is quite near to Knocknacara. So I walk with my mum. My mum goes to work, so she drops me off at, like, Joyce's, and I walk there.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many students in the school?
Oh, I don't know. Probably around 500, maybe more.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a bike shed or?
Yeah. It's not like, it's like 3 bikes.
3 bikes?
Yeah.
No, I have a daughter in school, it's 3 bikes.
Yeah.
So. Cormac, how about you? Wave your wand.
Well, given our location in the west of Ireland and also the amount of resources we have out here, I think it'd be quite possible for us to look into more sustainable energy, because it's always known as the wild west of Ireland, wild Atlantic way and so on. I think we could definitely look into wind energy and geothermal energy and hydroelectric power. I think I know that some people have objections to it and other people are quite for it, but regardless, it's definitely very doable out here. It's very, I think it'd be very easy to implement that more than other places. And we definitely have the space to do so. So I think that's very important.
Some people are concerned on wind turbines particularly, that it intrudes in nature or it damages nature sometimes. What's your sense when you see a wind farm? What do you think?
Well, I don't see it as a bad thing. I see like sustainable energy being produced, and in my head it's a good thing. But I can understand that people would have some objections to they're very big and they take up a lot of space. But in uninhabited areas, I think you could definitely you can use that space better. There are lots of areas in Connemara where there are a few houses and nothing else for a number of kilometres. And I think if people really have such a big objection to that, you kind of wonder, do they know the facts about wind turbines first? Will they not see the benefits outweighing the negatives of it?
Okay. Amy, not only are you the first directly elected mayor of Galway, you're the first female directly elected mayor of Galway. What are you going to do?
I think there's a lot of things you could do. In Galway, we're very lucky because it's such a small city that it's easier to get things done. Well, I think what I would do first is, in Galway, if you ever walk around, there's a lot of like litter and plastic just everywhere. And even Cormac was talking to us about like the cigarette butts and how like harmful they are for the environment because of the plastic that's in them. So I think main thing I would do is definitely set up like proper recycling kind of bins. I don't know if you've ever seen them in Dublin, like with the recycling, the landfill and the compost. I think that would be really helpful. And if even on the bins you had like labels of what you could put in everything. And then as well as that, and like decrease the number of plastic bottles in the city, I think we should have the refill water stations. I think they were on the news quite recently because of they're in a couple of cities in the UK where they just like will come up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and you can refill your water bottles. I think that would encourage a lot of people to cut down on their plastic. And then going off what Amy was saying about transport, I think to encourage people to not use their cars as much, we need to have safer cycle lanes and more cycle lanes, because even if you go around the city, there's hardly any of them. And like I live in like the middle of nowhere, and it's a really dangerous way if you were going to cycle to school, because the roads are bad and it's just not enough space, and it's not safe for their parents to let their kids cycle to school or walk to school. So I think if we worked on having other options other than driving, that would be really beneficial.
Is it not? Is it not very wet in the west of Ireland?
Well, I think I can walk in the rain. I think people could get over it.
Yeah, I prefer rain to 40 degrees at the moment. Jakub.
So to touch off what May was saying, okay, so just for example, how many here have a reusable bottle? A reusable bottle, okay.
This is not your standard audience. Whoever turns up for 10 o'clock in the hour of Maxima.
And how many people here today have a plastic bottle with them?
Oh.
Exactly. So what we're trying to say is to cut down the plastic and to buy your reusable bottles. They're in pennies for €2, like they're really good as well. And then another thing that I would do is maybe cut down the amount of cars that are allowed to drive in through like town. So for example, Air Square is always like the big thing. Everyone drives through Air Square, all the amount of buses that are in Air Square, like to go to Westside, there's 4 buses every hour. And to go out to Kinvara, there's only 6 buses a day?
There's less than that.
Less than 6 buses a day.
Not the most reliable buses. They're always 10 minutes late or more.
Yeah, there's only 2 for Barna.
2 for Barna?
Yeah, on Sundays, and I think there's 3 on weekdays. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that just proves the point that there's 4 buses every hour. So that's I don't know, I'm not good at maths. About 20 or 30 buses go in and out through Westside and Air Square every single day, and there's not enough buses to go out to the countryside. So that's definitely one of the big things that I'd say, is to cut down the amount of cars that can drive in through Air Square and town itself.
I come to the audience short. Just with 2 other questions, if I can, in terms of just to give a sense of what's happening. The next big climate strike, I understand it, is on the 20th of September.
Yeah.
What are the plans? What's going to happen, do you think?
Well, this strike is a general strike, so everyone can come. It's not just a youth strike. However, it is youth organised and youth-led, but we would encourage everyone of any age to come, because I think it shouldn't just be the young people, and everyone should come. So it will be kind of the same as most of the strikes. We have only just started organising because it's very hard to get people together during the summer. But usually it's always around midday, Air Square, and we'll probably march to Spanish Hill if the guards let us. But we can do it anyways if we don't.
What day of the week is the 20th?
It's always Fridays. All the strikes are always
Fridays, of course. Fridays for Future. And can I ask, what are the demands?
The demands are different based on each country. So our demands, there's 5 of them. So first of all, to declare climate emergency, which we have done, but I think there's talks of but we've done it anyways. And the second one is to tell the truth. So for politicians to not be afraid of like their own political game, but to actually say it and not be afraid of like losing voters or anything like that. And the third one is to listen to science, because although we would love for you to listen to us, we are only like 16 to 18-year-olds and we don't know everything, where scientists have PhD and they have a lot more information than we do. So to listen to the scientists and to take their advice and implement the actions that they see fit. And the fourth one is to declare ecocide as a crime. So ecocide, like destroying ecosystems and that kind of thing. Because right now, if you like destroy an ecosystem, there's no punishment at all. You have free reign to do what you want. So to definitely cut back on who's doing that. And then the fifth one, I think, is just a call to action for everyone, no matter what your age or anything like that, to join together, because there is power in the people and the people can make a change even if the government don't want to.
Amy, I interrupted you. Anyone else can come back in on this. Just briefly, I interrupted you when you were saying we have declared a climate and biodiversity crisis, but were you going to say something else there?
Well, I think there was 9 TDs, or is it 19?
Six
TDs. So I think, although a climate emergency was declared, I think the whole government need to declare it. It has to be a whole country-wide, because even though we've declared it, people still aren't taking it seriously. Like, we're in the middle of a climate crisis and we should be treating it as a crisis. So I think that's what I was going to say.
Like it's being pushed aside all the time. For example, I was talking to one of the councillors from the Galway City Council, and they were saying that they were going to put in a motion into the council, but it got moved over until September for it to be discussed. And also, there is no funding given from the government for them to work on the issue itself. So if the government's declaring a climate change emergency and they want like the local city councils and county councils to work on it, like how are they meant to work on it without money?
Yeah, just as Jakub was saying there, like even like when the climate bill came out, like I'm pretty sure like every single action is after like 20, like I don't know, like 35 or something, which is like too late. Like we've said this so many times, like we have 11 years left, and I think it might like be closer to 10 now. So like basically the whole climate bill was pointless, because no matter what you do after that time, it's going to make zero difference. So yeah. Okay. I'm going to throw it out to the audience and we can continue the conversation with a slightly wider one. If anyone wants to ask a question, be brief if you can. If you maybe could introduce yourself as well, that would be very useful. I won't ask your age, but so it's hard to see. But if people want to put their hands up and want to ask a question directly, the gentleman there in the middle, do we need a microphone, or is it possible? Yeah, the microphone coming. So if you might introduce yourself and comment, short comment if necessary, but preferably a question to one of our panelists or all of them.
Is it on? Hello, my name is Jim. That's enough of an introduction, I think. And I have a brother who's a farmer. And today he's making silage bales of silage, wrapped in plastic. And I'm about to go out to him and maybe help him a little bit. I grew up on the farm, and I feel that it's important that as an agricultural country, we maintain a future for agriculturalists and farmers. I'd like to know what the panel think about what I should say to him about his plastic consumption, his oil consumption, the methane his cattle are producing, and still be his friend.
Who wants to answer to Jim's brother?
Simple 3 words. Don't use it. Just don't.
Yeah, I think obviously agriculture is one of our main exports, and it's definitely a huge part of our economy. But I think here in Ireland, you don't, especially too with methane and cows, we can support growing crops. Like cows shouldn't just be what farmers do. They have other options which are a lot better for the environment. With the plastic, the plastic, I think, is always going to be an issue because people are very resistant to change, and farmers have been doing this for a number of years. They don't want to change the plastic. But I think if you research it and if you go into it, there are always other options. Plastic is never just the only option. Even like if you look in supermarkets, plastic with fruit, like we don't need the plastic around that. In Thailand, I think they use bamboo like shavings to wrap their fruit around. There's always another option to using plastic. So I think I would advise him to research more, and there's plastics that can like biodegrade. So if he wanted to go into that and use them for his bales, I think that would be a good option.
If you researched it properly, it probably would be more cheaper, to be honest, because you could reuse it as well.
Jim, could I ask you a question back, if you don't mind? I don't know if you still have the microphone. Where is the farm, and was it the family farm, and did you grow up in it?
Yeah, I grew up on the farm. It's in East Galway. It's a cattle and sheep farm, and it's been in the family for about 5 generations or 6 generations. Yeah, about 6 generations.
And within your own living memory, if you must have grown up there, has it changed?
Yeah, we used to try to make hay in the old days and sometimes fail. It would perhaps rot because of the rain, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And so this is a way of making it more efficiently, or effectively rather, perhaps not more efficiently, but more effectively, so that it doesn't rot and so that numbers of cattle are now higher than when I was young, and there's a lot more tractor use than there used to be, etc.
Yeah. And has the natural world there changed as we've changed our farming practices?
Well, my brother is interested in protecting the environment, and he has planted a lot of trees on his land. So yeah, in a way that is quite a good thing. He's working together with Quilcha for that. But yeah, there are a lot fewer rabbits, fewer squirrels. I hardly ever see corncrakes anymore. They're not there anymore. The bog in that area was being used by Bord na Móna or there was a train line being built through the bog between Roscommon and East Galway, which eventually never got built in a place called Aula, but the bog was all drained at that time, so the raised bog is destroyed and actually sinking now. So yeah, a lot of negative interference with the environment, yes.
If I just throw my own tuppence worth in, because I think it's important. I think we need to break this kind of story about environment versus farmer, because you know that land like no one else knows it, or your brother knows even better, I'm sure. And as we try and maybe restore that bog, when you think of the storage of carbon, that was 10,000 years of stored carbon. We'll never get a better carbon storage system than our bogs and our wetlands. It's not just pure bogs. And we're going to have to start paying farmers for that knowledge of stewardship of the land. And it's also paying for protecting biodiversity. And I would hope there's still going to be, obviously, we're going to have to concentrate on food production and doing that efficiently. But if we can look after all those other elements of protecting our water, storing carbon, restoring nature, providing access, training a new generation of young farmers, and pay farmers well for that, I think we will break this story of us versus environmentalists versus farmers, because it won't work if they see us as the problem and we see them as the problem. They're the solution. They're our frontline fighters against climate change, in my mind. Other questions? I hope you're not going to be interrogated back if you ask a question necessarily, but the gentleman here at the front, sorry, but there's a long way to come up to the microphone.
Hi, thanks very much. My name is Gary Goggins and I work as a researcher in the university and an environmental social scientist. Several of you have mentioned that you want your children in the future to have the same standard of living as yourselves or your young cousin, etc. Do you see our standard of living as a problem in any way? Do you think maybe we consume too much stuff and we need to cut back? So you see, some of you said, do you want your children to have a better standard of living? So what does that entail, and how does that square with climate change? And also people in foreign countries, let's think of Africa, Southeast Asia, etc. Should they also have the same standard of living that we have now? And how can everybody maintain this for the long term with within the parameters of climate change? A bit complex question, maybe, but
That's the PhD level question.
Yeah, well, I guess even just talking about like the meat industry and fast fashion, that makes such huge difference. So obviously, you know, if my cousin does grow up and have a life, it will have to be different. Like she obviously won't be able, but it'll be good different because there'll be more knowledge, hopefully teaching it in school. Things will be more niche. It'll be like, you know, for plastic and stuff. So even like, just like the meat industry, it's not even just about the meat, but like there's the packaging, then there's the like cutting down the trees to make space for the land. And there's like so many, and there's like you're not actually like supposed to like drink milk either. It's actually quite bad for you if you drink a lot. So there's like loads of things like that we're not supposed to like do. But as well with the fast fashion, like it's really bad. Like the amount of clothes that end up in landfill. Like if a big like shop online, like if there's something wrong with the clothing, they'll just throw it automatically into the landfill. And so like a lot of it just ends up in huge big landfills in like India and stuff, and nothing happens to it. And it's like a lot of like clothes as well have plastic in them. And even just the conditions, like you could go into another whole section of that with like the child labor and the conditions like that they're working in. There's like so much different, you know, it's like a rabbit hole. You talk about one thing and then you have to go into the other thing. So yeah, I think they'll have to have a different life, but it'll be better in my opinion.
And I think we have to change the way that we use things. More things nowadays are kind of one use, single use plastics and so on. And even fast fashion, you know, you wear a t-shirt 2 or 3 times, then you chuck it away. I think that we have to look at kind of more durable things and more things that we can use again and again and again, like reusable plastic bottles, like Jakub was saying. You know, our kids will understand that better. When I was growing up, it didn't seem like anything bad at all to have a plastic bottle. You could drink water from a plastic bottle, fine, you know. But now we kind of realize that that's not as, you know, that's not a sustainable way to live, and it's not going to be good for our planet in the future.
And I think one of our main issues, we overproduce and we overconsume in like every single aspect. Like if you look at food, in Europe we only eat half the food that is produced and imported in Europe. And the amount of food waste that we have is outstanding. And in the US it's even worse. They only eat a fifth of the food that's produced and imported. So I think the main problem that we have, and I think that should be improved for future generations, is that we need to stop producing things so much and like not, as Jakub was saying, they're not durable. A lot of the stuff that we produce doesn't last, and it's just creating more and more waste. And the big problem is we're not actually being affected that much here in Ireland and in the Western world. We're not the ones paying the price. Like in sub-Saharan Africa, I think in the world in general, I think there's expected to be 140 million climate migrants by 2050 because the temperatures are getting so hot, it's not livable. Like famines are increasing because they can't grow their food because there's not enough water and the crops aren't growing. And then even if we look at global warming, the permafrost is melting. And as the permafrost melts, like diseases that have been trapped in there from like hundreds and hundreds of years ago are like starting to escape and go into the soil and the water, eventually end up in our food supply, which people are eating and then dying. I think in 2016 there was a boy in Siberia who died and dozens were hospitalized because a reindeer had some disease and it had frozen in the permafrost like 75 years ago. But the permafrost is melting at a much faster rate than it should be. So it ended up in the soil and he ate it, and because it ended up in the food supply, and he died. Like on the Canada-Arctic kind of border, the permafrost is melting 70 years before it's supposed to. It's such a rapid rate and we're just fueling it more and more, and we're not stopping all our overconsumption and overproduction.
And like, for example as well, the government's like saying that they're going to work on this topic, but they keep pushing it back. So like any single time we're going to say we're going to work on a topic, will they work on it now or will they push it back another 30 years?
The lady here on the left. Sorry, that's right down the end.
Hi, thanks. My name is Denise. You mentioned earlier about the government signing the climate emergency, But then I just found out recently, apparently about a week later, they agreed a contract for a state. It's Chinese owned, but it's not that known. I think it's CN002 or something, oil exploration. And I live in Canada at the moment. I worked for a Chinese company. And I could digress into loads of topics here, but absolutely terrifies me. There's no respect for anything. And it's like I don't know if anyone here saw the documentary Atlantic. Just like it took me a while of traveling to be kind of proud of being Irish. Just for my own personal background thing, I hated like the drinking culture and sorry, I'm digressing again, but it's like it's great to enjoy a laugh and a joke, but I think on the world stage, we're taken advantage of an awful lot because we're small. It's like we have the most generous oil and gas. Like we gain nothing from those fields on the south coast and the west coast. Like the Atlantic happened before my time. Like I was in the 70s. I'm 28 now, but my uncle is quite politicised, and he was saying how I can't remember the minister at the time said that basically the government that signed it did economic treason, which I would agree with. And now I think, like when you hear that they a week after signing the climate emergency, they offer exploration rights to a Chinese-based company, and I don't think that's all they're going to be doing. Like, what do you think as the Green Party, or what do you think in that we could try and rescind that agreement, or is it just going to go ahead and be allowed?
Well, I should say, first of all, I was one of those ministers involved in that area at the time, so I have to be careful in terms of... But I saw that film, The Atlantic, and I agreed. I thought it was a very good film. And I do think there's something about, particularly for the west of Ireland, for Galway, we have a responsibility now, I think, that our sea area is 10 times our land area. And the Atlantic's changing, the North Atlantic's changing rapidly as meltwaters come down from the Arctic. My personal view is we should stop all offshore oil and gas in the Atlantic straight away. But I would like to go further from that. I think we should have marine protected areas. I would set aside E.O. Wilson's dictum, half of the North Atlantic, to research what's actually happening and to actually monitor and manage the wildlife systems there. Because I think oil and gas exploration is going to finish next year. I can't see it surviving any program for government negotiations. But the real question is, what do we do proactively, positively in monitoring and trying to restore the natural systems? Because it's the loss of fisheries as well is a key issue in my mind. And that film was very good on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you want Amy.
My dad was actually the director of that, and he also, but he also did the pipe. But I was really young when he did them, so we used to go to Mayo a lot. I don't really remember much of the pipe, but the Atlantic I remember lots. So I guess the pipe was mostly about Shell, and when I was really young, I'd go up with him, and like when I was like 9, I'd be like at the border between so basically I'm like, my dad's from Mayo, so what they did was they wanted to put the pipes underneath for some who don't know, but the problem was that they were dangerous, so they wanted all the people to move out of the land. They wanted people who had great grandparents had built these houses. They were just saying, you have to go. So we spent years protesting, and just seeing at that young, no respect. My dad had he was at one of the protests, and he has it recorded, and just the guards chucking these 50-year-old farmers and women just trying to protect their land into the ditch, and just it was mental. And then it was really good. Atlantic, I guess, was a bit different because Atlantic was more about the facts, and it was about a different part because Shell eventually did get out of there because we kept annoying them. But yeah, Atlantic was really good. I'd advise you all to watch it.
Is there any sense of being on the west coast, the cutting edge of Europe, that the Atlantic being... does that ever, when you were saying Cormac there about being on Silver Strand and that sense of, does it ever come out in that sense that we're on the edge of the Atlantic, the edge of Europe, the edge of something really big? Do you think that's in the psyche here or in your mind?
Yeah, I definitely feel like we're kind of the last frontier before America. We are really at the edge of everything, especially here in Galway. I think it's important to protect that. Oil, searching for oil can actually lead to a lot of pollution as well. The oceans, oil spills, and so on. Like in the Gulf of Mexico, has it has an awful impact sometimes, and that could happen to us as well.
Jakub, if your family's from Poland originally, was it you were saying
Yes.
to start? Is there a different mindset that comes from being in the middle of Europe and being here on the edge of the Atlantic, do you think?
First of all, the weather-wise, like, you can have 4 seasons in one day, and I'm still trying to get over this in Ireland. You can have the 4 seasons in one day. In Poland, like, right now, we're having a heat wave, and, like, my mom literally just came back from Poland 2 days ago, and she said that she couldn't bear the heat. We're here 13 years now, and she said she couldn't bear the heat in Poland comparing to Ireland because she's just so used to the Irish weather now. So it's like the weather is a big factor as well. But like living like in Poland, I lived in the middle of Poland, so I don't have anywhere to go to see the sea or anything like that. But here I live on the west coast, which is amazing because you could see the sea. You have all this amazing like features that you can see and different sites that you can go to. So it's always better, like for me personally, I feel like it's better to live on the west and beside the air and like beside the water because your mental state is better than in this city.
The west is the best. Now, I'm very conscious we're out of time pretty much. I might just take very briefly 2 or 3, and it literally would be the 3 over I see over here. For you, apologies about that. One more question.
The woman in the back, yeah.
The woman, Martina, in the back there, if you want to. You have the last question. Sorry, Katrina.
Councillor Martina O'Connor, Green Party member. The 5 call to action from the Friday strikes, I would call for a 6th one from my age group, if that wasn't presentable, is that we were brave enough in this country to place a huge emphasis on education of our younger, of our next generation. We invest, much of our income into that education, and it is so obvious here on the stage today that not just what they've learned in class or in school, but they've learned, they've opened their minds, they've listened to scientists, they've listened to, access programs and all sorts of information, and they're using that to call us, a more mature group, to be braver about the plastic, to be braver. I would call my own age group to be braver, just as the younger age group have been in the last while. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy, I might just start with you, and then a brief final comment going across Cormac. So if you want, just and we'll wrap up then.
Just about
But that what Martina said there about.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree. It's still even weird to me that they don't talk about that stuff in primary school, because for me it's all about knowledge. Like if you just teach, if you taught 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds in primary school, and even first years, they're so willing and to try, and they're so open-minded at that age that you could easily get them to use more. I think it's just that they don't know. They probably don't know about the reusable balls, about single-use plastic. They just haven't been told. So I think education is such a huge factor, and I really hope that it does get started more in schools, because at the moment we don't really have much, and the only really way is social media, and it's the internet, which is kind of tricky nowadays with fake news, and you don't know what's right for wrong, and if things have been kind of changed. So yeah, I think education is one of the biggest factors that we need to change at the moment.
I suppose one of the biggest things is not to point blame at people. Often we can blame the older generations for messing things up for us, but I think more just to try and change minds and open minds. People, a lot of people, they grew up like that. They didn't know any better, and it wasn't their fault. They didn't do anything intentionally, of course. But if we change minds, new generations and also the older generations, we can all make a difference together.
What I wanted to say is, although we don't have much time left, I think there is still hope, but it's about everyone trying as best they can and making an effort and not putting it on the back burner, as Jakub was saying. This is a really important issue, and it's not that difficult to change, especially in our own lives. There's so many different things that we can do, and as like the consumer changes, the businesses change with it, because the business will always want to meet the consumer's needs. So if you, even when you're doing your shop, just like even mention it to the manager, like, oh, all this stuff is wrapped in plastic, like why can't we do this? Because businesses benefit from like activism in a way. Like even in Galway, we've seen like an increase in kind of environmentally friendly businesses, like Cafe Temple is like all vegan and plastic free.
And the refill shop.
Yeah. And the filling station that's just opened up. Like I was walking down Abbey Street and it's packed because people in Galway want to make a change. And now we have businesses that are also making a change. So we need to keep going with that. And even like in like Lidl, they have their like recycling kind of thing where you can take off the packaging before you leave the shop. So I think I would urge everyone to make those changes and to say it to everyone you can. And there's so many things you can do if you just like start doing them, and things will like follow one after another. And I think and also another thing to say is, especially as youth, sometimes when we do these kind of things, adults can be quite condescending. It's like, oh, we're listening to you, but then they don't change. So I think you should be the example that you can listen to youth and listen to the science and listen to everything like that and actually implement it in your lives, because I think we can solve this problem just with the people making a change.
So like May said earlier on, we do these strikes, like 5 strikes so far, I think, or 4 or 5 strikes we've done so far. And it's mainly been young people. But the whole thing is, if we all want the action to happen, we all need to come together and do all this together, you know? So when we're doing the climate change strikes, like, we should have the adults there as well to show their point of view, you know? They're saying that they're so proud of their children, like, our parents are probably proud of us up here right now, you know? But like, they're saying that they're all proud of this, but they're not actually doing some of the stuff that we would like them to do. For example, going shopping, they'll still bring their plastic bags and everything, and like, don't. Just bring your reusable containers. When you're going to a meat shop, bring your reusable containers. When you're going fruit shopping, just pick 1 or 2. Don't bring the full bag of apples with the plastic packaging on it. Like, there's so many other ways that you can do it. So, like, if the young people can do it, so can the adults. So, like, just tell everyone like they can do it.
I might just wrap things up, if I can, just a couple of thoughts. Firstly, yes, it's about shopping and about your own personal behavior, but actually it's top-down as well. We need to make it easier for people to do the right thing. Yeah. And if it's all this moral obligation on you doing the right thing, we'll just shame people and it won't work. It does require us adults in the political system to respond to the crisis in commensurate ways. Second just thought, and it's a slightly scary thought, when you said, Jakub, about this heat wave today in Europe, recently in Central Europe, the scientists are saying this is very short-term, immediate. But they think where it's going to go now, this heat wave, is just going to head up towards Greenland, Arctic, very hot body of water. And anyone who follows it, the ice cover is close to its historic 2012 low. And in June and July, the melt in the Greenland ice sheet was beyond compared. It just took off. And that's before, if this heat wave does do what the scientists now expect, it's very frightening. I mention that because I think, Amy, what you said is true. We have to be truthful to the science. We have to listen to the science. But actually, I think it's important to be here in a hall of humanities and the arts. And it's the Arts Festival that's hosting this event. That it will need to be science with a bit of soul. You know, it needs a story that is more than just the facts and the figures and more than just frightening people. It has to be something that gives us a sense of hope and a sense of mission and a sense of purpose that's fulfilling, not just in a dry, science isn't dry, but not just in the parts per million or gigawatts this or molecules of that. It has to be a story for ourselves and our purpose and our sense of being here. And what I think has been really significant about the climate strikes and the voice that we're hearing from younger people is that it includes that. It's a whole variety of different emotions, including upbeat emotions. You know, where the whole chanting thing, it's fun, but it's not sparing the truth. It's telling the truth in a way that's very vibrant and that's why I think it's been successful. I would like to thank everyone here for coming. I'd like to thank our 4 speakers, our panelists, and let's turn out on the 20th of September. As you said, everyone, climate strike.
I want to thank our 4 wonderful young people. I feel inspired by them. I feel educated by them, not in a pompous way. I absolutely agree with our wonderful moderator, Eamonn, and thank you, Eamonn, for coming here today. And I would love to see this happening every year at First Thought. So I'm issuing an invitation to the 4 of you now to come back again this time next year, and let's see how you're doing then. Because we need to watch this as something that goes year by year. You're 4 wonderful spokespeople for your own city, for your schools, for your peer group, and for the movement to which you're so passionately committed. And I don't see that changing, so don't let it change. This time next year, come back just as passionate and committed as you are now. Thank you all again, and Eamonn, thank you so much. Now, we have to get you out of here very quickly because we have another event coming on. So if you want to chat to the fabulous young people, you can talk to them outside the building out there. Thank you very much.